Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am going to read today Adria English's testimony to. Hang on, sorry. Hi, today I'm going to read Adria English's complaint. I have never read this one before. This is a far more detailed complaint and a completely long one, so it's going to take a couple of hours of our time. It's a lot more detailed involvement into the enterprise itself. It mentions Trey Songz. It mentions Chris Brown in this lawsuit. It's a very, 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 very interesting one. Out of all the ones I've come across so far, I have to be honest, I'm not sure if this one is a civil or a criminal one. I'm not sure. But let's try and read forth. I might do this in two parts, so be warned if you haven't got the time for that. I'm going to cut past all the media, the names and all that, and get to play a preliminary statement. On November 16th, 2023, Cassandra Ventura, aka Cassie, filed a 35-page lawsuit in which she exposed defendant Combs of subjecting her to nearly a decade of physical and sexual emotional abuse, punctuated by rape, sex trafficking, and being forced to engage in drug-fueled, non-consensual encounters with other men. Ordinarily, when the lawsuit, such as Cassie's, is filed, that involves events that took place a long ago. Witnesses are few and far between, and evidence is hard to muster. Not so for the claims brought against defendant Combs. Within minutes of filing, Miss Ventura's claims were confirmed by various witnesses, including a musician whose car defendants blew up, various individuals who observed defendant Combs beat Miss Ventura, and video released by CNN just a few weeks ago shows defendant Combs physically abusing and battering and assaulting Miss Ventura. Since Miss Ventura's brave decision to file a lawsuit against defendant Combs has accumulated numerous lawsuits across the country for same conduct alleged by Miss Ventura. Days later, more lawsuits were filed against defendant Combs. One being plaintiff Dickerson Neal alleged that Miss Defendant Combs drugged and sexually assaulted her when she was a college student, with other lawsuit currently being appropriately refiled in New Jersey accused Miss Combs and singer Aaron Hall of forcing the plaintiff and another unidentified woman to non-consensual sex. At the time, fourth lawsuit was filed, this one against defendant Combs companies and defendant Harvey Pierre, longtime president of Bad Boy Holdings, Incorporated. The suit alleged that Mr. Pierre used his position of power at Bad Boy to groom and sexually assault his former assistant, and that Bad Boy looked the other way at the time. The fifth lawsuit filed against defendant Combs includes allegations brought by Doe plaintiff are just as egregious than those brought by prior victims, including that the plaintiff Doe was sex trafficked and gang raped by defendant Combs and various other individuals. The sixth lawsuit was filed against defendant Combs and various other defendants by plaintiff Rodney Jones, including allegations of sexual assault, sex work, sex and drug trafficking, and an ongoing criminal enterprise corruption organization, similar to the claims plaintiff files in his instant action. The seventh lawsuit was filed against defendant Combs and defendant Combs' son Christian Combs by defendant Grace O'Maher. Plaintiff in this suit alleges she was sexually assaulted and physically harmed by the actions of defendant's son, and that defendant Combs aided and abetted his son's torturous conduct. An eighth lawsuit filed against defendant Combs by model plaintiff Crystal McKinney alleges that she was drugged and sexually assaulted by defendant Combs. The allegations of plaintiff McKinney's complaints echo similar claims filed by plaintiff in an instant action. The ninth lawsuit filed by defendant Combs is April Lamprose, in that the suit of Lamprose alleges that the defendant of battery, assault, negligence, infliction of emotional distress, and violation of victims of gender-motivated violence protection of the law. Again, eerily similar to the claims made by plaintiff herein. Prior to any cases above filed, defendant Combs was named as the defendant in civil sexual assault lawsuit in Florida, including R&B singer Jermaine Neverson, aka Trey Songz. Defendant Combs also implicated the law filed in California against the R&B singer Chris Brown for a sexual assault that took place on a yacht anchored in defendant Combs' 5-star island estate in Miami. Chris Brown was also referenced in the lawsuit. Plaintiff Rodney Jones and defendant Combs implicated Mr. Brown was in Mr. Combs' Los Angeles home consulting with underage girls and sex workers. This is now the 10th lawsuit filed against defendant Combs since November 16th. Just as the allegations brought by the other 9 plaintiffs, plaintiff English's claims are just as egregious. Due to these numerous lawsuits filed against defendant Combs alleging the same or similar acts, there is now growing awareness of defendant Combs was engaging in far more sinister acts than previously known, including physical abuse and sex trafficking. Specifically, from 2004 to 2009, plaintiff was sex trafficked by defendants Combs, Thomas, and Arabov. Additionally, because defendant Combs' relationship with defendant Vibe, due to their conspiracy in sex trafficking enterprise, defendant knew they could publish plaintiff's likeness without her consent and the fear of recourse, and chose plaintiff's likeness to use without permission in an effort to continue the defendant's sex trafficking enterprise for their financial benefit. Therefore, plaintiff brings claims pursuant to New York civil rights law. Plaintiff can support her allegations with this complaint and has lived her adult life with the memories of being trapped in a circle of sex trafficking she never asked to be part of, and was chosen because defendant Combs knew he could groom her. For years, plaintiff has been affected by defendant Combs' actions and has suffered extreme emotional distress, impacting nearly every aspect of the plaintiff's life and personal relationship. Given all the brave individuals who have come forward against Combs, plaintiff is doing the same. Plaintiff brings these actions seeking injunctive, declaratory and monetary relief against defendants in violation of the Victims and Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Law, Gender-Motivated Violence Act in New York City. Jurisdiction and venue. This cause and personal jurisdiction over defendants under and consistent with the constitutional requirements due to process, in that the defendant acting directly or through his agents or apparent agents committed one or more of the following: the transaction of any business within state, the making of any contract within state, the commission of torturous act within district, and the ownership, use, or possession of any real estate in this state. As of this date, filing defendants Combs, Jacobs, BBE, SJC, Vibe, and PMC, and organisational those have consistently and purposefully availed themselves of the privilege of conducting activities within New York, thus invoking the benefits and protection of New York law. In return for these benefits and protections, defendants must submit to the burden of litigation in New York. This litigation arises from or relates to the torturous activities of defendant Combs, Jacobs, and Thomas, BBE, SGC, VAG, PMC, and the organisational dose visited upon plaintiff Jones in New York and Florida. This torturous conduct violated New York stated federal RICO laws and United States Victims Laws of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of 2000, requiring defendants to litigate these claims in this district does not offend traditional notions of fair play and substantial justice. Plaintiffs' claims arise from some conduct occurring by defendants in New York, specifically the trafficking of plaintiff across state lines between New York and Florida. This court has jurisdiction over these actions, pursuant of 4 original jurisdiction over civil actions, where matter of controversy exceeds to the sum of the value of $75,000, and is between citizens and of different states. This court has subject matter jurisdiction over the matter, because one claim at issue arises under the Lanham Act. This court also subject matter supplementing because the states of law claims forms part of the same case and controversy as the claim arises under the federal statute. Pursuant to the venue is proper in this court because a substantial part of the events or omissions given rise to this action alleged herein occurred in this state. So the matter says she's had in civil in different place, maybe she's from Canada or whatever, is now being dealt with in New York, you know? And then she might have civil matters that are against the other two. Plaintiff brings suit against defendant pursuant to the New York Gender Motivated Violence Act to redress substantial lifetime injuries she has suffered as a result of being drugged, sex trafficked, and assaulted by defendant Combs, Thomas, and Jacob. This action arises under the New York rights law. This court has personal jurisdiction over defendants, and each of them because defendants have purposefully directed their unlawful conduct to this judicial district and have conducted substantial business in this judicial district. Procedural requirements. The New York City Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Act created to look back on window of March 1st, 2003, which runs for 2 years, for survivors of gender-motivated violence, allowing them to sue their abusers regardless of when the abuse occurred. The New York Gender Motivated Violence Act revives any claims against any party who commits, directs, enables, participates in, or conspires in a commission of crime of violence motivated by gender as a cause of action against such party in any court of competent jurisdiction. I wonder why all of a sudden they brought that little thing of 2 year in for. I wonder if they had issues. The affiliate division has held that sexual assault is an act of gender motivated violence under the law, as coerced sexual activity is dehumanizing and fear inducing malice or ill will based on gender is apparent from the alleged commission of the act itself. Anonymous inheres where consent is absent. The above described conduct of defendant Combs, Thomas and Jacob including, but not limited to, defendant Jacob's sexual assault on plaintiff constitutes a crime of violence and a crime of violence motivated by gender against the plaintiff as well as the defendant Combs, as well as at Combs' direction, enabling participation and conspiring in the commission of a crime of violence motivated by gender as defined by New York City Gender Motivated Violence Act. Given the extensive media coverage and numerous lawsuits filed in the District of New York, both federal and state against defendant Combs, defendant BBE Combs, Enterprise, Jacobs Vibe, PMC, and Doe organizations were put on the notice of the sexual abuse and trafficking allegation made by defendant Combs. Parties: defendant Combs, Sean Combs. Defendant Combs retains his residence in both Florida, California, and upon information and belief is a citizen of the state of California. I always thought he was from New York. At all relevant times, defendant Combs was a citizen resident of the state of New York. Defendant Sean Combs is a rapper and record executive, popularly known as stage name Puff Daddy, Puffy, whatever. Defendant Combs rose to prominence in the music and entertainment industry over the decades and is regularly referred to as a hip-hop mogul. Defendant Combs first accused of acts described in this complaint by his longtime paramour and former BBE artist Cassie Ventura as pictured above on the 16th of 2023. There's Cassie. There's Cassie. Defendant Combs is a Grammy Award-winning musician, rapper, producer. Defendant P. Diddy Combs founded and co-defendants BBE, Bad Boy Enterprise, Something Combs, and CGE. Defendant Diddy has signed through Bad Boy Entertainment some of the biggest art stars in the music, including Rick Ross, Machine Gun Kelly, Notorious B.I.G., New Edition, Mace, Pitbull, Lil Jon, Fabulous, French Montana, and groups like Dante Kane, 112, and Total, to name just a few. In 2008, Defendant Combs was the first male rapper to get a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Defendant Diddy founded Bad Boy Records in 1992, and the company has sold over 50 million records, produced 38 platinum albums, and won multiple Grammy Awards according to the official website of Combs Global. In 2022, Forbes estimated that Defendant Diddy Combs was one of the wealthiest hip-hop artists in America, and that his net worth was $1 billion. Upon information and belief, Defendant Diddy has a long history of committing physical and sexual violence against women and men, both of age and underaged, as documented and publicly available in over 9 lawsuits across the country, as well as an extensive media coverage on the lawsuits and the allegations made herein. Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated is a domestic business corporation licensed to do business in New York and headquartered at 1440 Broadway, 3rd floor, New York Bad Boy Entertainment Holding Incorporated is a domestic business corporation licensed to do business in New York since 1992. Defendant Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings Incorporated is a music, media, and entertainment company founded and owned by Defendant Combs. Bad Boy is incorporated and headquartered in New York, New York. Defendant has been named in several lawsuits where Defendant Combs has been accused of claims of abuse and sex trafficking. As every business Defendant Combs engages with, play a role in his illegal enterprise. Sean John Clothing. In 1998, Combs founded Sean John, which has retail sales of over $450 million. As CEO and president of the company, Defendant Combs was representing Sean John when he conspired as sex trafficked plaintiff. Sean John Clothing LLC is a domestic liability company licensed to business in New York. Defendant Combs Enterprise LLC. Combs Global. Defendant Combs Enterprise has its principal place of business located in New York. Upon information and belief, Combs Enterprise LLC, Combs Global, upon information and belief, Combs Global, domestic liability license to do business in New York. Defendant Combs Enterprise LLC is a business conglomerated founded by Defendant Combs, which is prevalent in the music, entertainment, fashion, spirits, and television industry, while included a diverse portfolio in business and investment, including fragrance, marketing, and media properties and liquor. Tomoko Thomas. I didn't know it was a woman. Defendant Thomas, upon information and belief, is a citizen of the state of New York. Defendant Thomas, upon information and belief, was an employee of Defendant BBE at all relevant times. So she's been there from day one. Defendant Thomas, in her employment capacity, was responsible for transporting and making payment to individuals like the plaintiff in furtherance of corrupt organisation or sex trafficking on behalf of Defendant Combs and the beneficiaries of the corrupt organisation, including Defendants Jacob, Vibe, and PMC. Defendant Jacob are above Jacob and Jacob the jeweler. Upon information and belief, Defendant Jacob, at all relevant times, was a resident at New York. Upon information and belief, Defendant Jacob, at all relevant times, was a citizen of New York, despite being born Uzbekistan. Don't know where that is, never heard of it. Maybe by Kazakhstan. Defendant Jacob was beneficiary of the corrupt organisation run by Defendant Combs, Bad Boy Entertainment, Thomas, Vibe, and PMC, and is pictured with the plaintiff above when he knowingly had intercourse with the plaintiff, who was trafficked for specific purpose. Defendant Jacob, 2008, was sentenced to 2.5 years of federal prison regarding multi-state drug ring, was fined £50,000 and had a forfeit of $2 million to the government, US government. Had to forfeit $2 million. Oh, that looks a lot more like $2 billion. Prior to being in prison, Defendant Jacob frequently parties run by Defendant Combs, where he knowingly participated in illegal commodifications of women via sex trafficking. Upon information and belief, Defendant Jacob still runs a business, Jacob & Co., licensed to do business in New York, with its headquarters located on East 57th Street, New York. Defendant Vibe magazine. Upon information and belief, Defendant Vibe runs a magazine licensed to do business in New York, with its headquarters located in 475 Fifth Avenue in New York. Defendant Vibe has had an ongoing relationship with Defendant Combs and all of the defendants' enterprise, including BBC, SGC, and CGE, was corrupt and exploitative to plaintiff and to benefit Defendant Vibe and other members of the corrupt organisation. It's very complicated, isn't it? What it's trying to say is that the director of the magazine had a relationship with Combs. So she was trafficking on behalf of him, a Vibe, and Puff Daddy, you know. So he went to prison. He come out of prison and he started helping him with a magazine. It sounds, the Defendant Vibe's ongoing beneficiary relationship with Defendant Combs dates back to 1993. Defendant Vibe further injured plaintiff in an effort to further the corrupt organisation when it published plaintiff's picture in the issue pictured above without plaintiff's notice or consent, written or otherwise. Defendant Penske Media Corporation. Right, wow, there's a lot here. Upon the information and belief, Defendant PMC is the owner and the parent company of Defendant Vibe. Upon information and belief, PMC is a Delaware corporation with its headquarters in California. Defendant PMC does business in New York throughout its ownership of Defendant Vibe and its distribution of several media outlets that are distributed, marketed, and consumed in this jurisdiction. So his media is done in New York, even though his headquarters are in not Delaware, California. Defendant John and Jane Doe 1 to 10, organisational Does 1 to 10. These must be women that include and possibly give responsibility to them to do work there and God knows what else. Upon information and belief, plaintiff alleges that Defendant Does 1 through to 10, inclusive, are other parties not yet identified to have violated plaintiff by sex trafficking her, conspired and or aided and abetted the defendant in sex trafficking the plaintiff through their participation in a corrupt organisation that contributed to the plaintiff being sex trafficked or having engaged in one or more of the wrongful practices alleged herein. The true names, whether corporate, individual, or otherwise, of the defendants 1 to 10 inclusive are presently unknown to the plaintiff, so she doesn't know their names, which therefore sues said defendants by fictional names will seek leave and amend this complaint to show their true names a capacity when same have been ascertained present. Well, what I read the other day is that a victim was refused refused testimony because she didn't give a name. So if you go into a criminal case, I think it's very, unless it's an underage situation, they will require, your name. And the thing is, it's not private, it should be sealed. But people who are bad people shouldn't be sealed, Upon information and belief, the plaintiff believes that all of the defendants, those 1 to 10, are citizens of New York and Florida. Upon information and belief, plaintiff believes thereon alleges that at all times relevant here to each of the defendants' organizational, those 1 to 10, were the agent, affiliate, officer, director, manager, principal, alter ego, and or employee of defendant crimes. BBE, SJC, and or CME. So I'll translate that a little bit. These were all employed. These were all given, names, jobs, titles, but they were all abused themselves, by the sounds of things. And it was at all times acting within the scope of such agency, affiliation, alter ego relationship, and or employment, and actively participated in or subsequently ratified and adopted or both, each and all of the act or conducted and alleged, with full knowledge of all the facts and circumstances, including, but not limited to, full knowledge of each and every violation of the plaintiff's rights and damages to the plaintiff proximately caused thereby. Upon information and belief, plaintiff believes all of the defendants' organizational those 1 to 10 are business licensed and or doing business in the state of New York or Florida. Upon information and belief, plaintiff alleges that defendants' organizational DOE 1 through to 10 inclusively are other parties not yet identified who have violated plaintiff by sex trafficking her and conspired through their participation in a corruption of organization that contributed and aided and abetted the defendant in sex trafficking the plaintiff, or having engaged in one or more of wrongful practices alleged herein. The true names of whether corporate, individual, or otherwise the defendants 1 to 10 inclusive, are presently unknown to plaintiff, which therefore sues said defendants by which such fictitious names, and will seek leave to amend this complaint to show their true names and capacities when same have been ascertained pursuant. So what he's saying is, until he come forward, he can't see them, and the names may be put forward. He can't stop that from happening. Anyway, limitations Article 16 of the CPLR do not apply because one or more of them exceptions set forth in CPLR and or apply. Plaintiff Adria English. Plaintiff is an individual who is a citizen of the United States and a resident of California. Plaintiff, at all times relevant to the action, resided and was in the state of New York. Prior to moving to New York in or around 2004, plaintiff participated as an actor in the adult film industry under the name Unique. Okay. Plaintiff participated in approximately 8 adult films prior to moving to New York, which were done while plaintiff was a teenager. Plaintiff was coerced by veteran porn star Jake Steed into doing these films with the promise they would never be viewed or circulated in the United States. Plaintiff moved to New York from California to evade the disappointment of her family when they discovered she was acting in adult movies, as plaintiff was led to believe the adult movies would only be seen and purchased abroad, therefore difficult to be viewed by those who knew her personally. Plaintiff moved to New York destitute and homeless, with her then boyfriend starving up and coming model Anthony Gallo. While plaintiff's then boyfriend auditioned for modeling gigs and attended go-sees in New York, plaintiff began go-go dancing and performing at Larry Flint's Hustlers Club on 54th Street in New York City under the stage name Sasha. On or about mid-2004, Mr. Gallo attended an audition for Sean John modeling campaign in New York, where plaintiff accompanied him. During that audition, another model and Mr. Gallo were asked to perform fellatio on defendant Combs in order to book the modeling campaign. Talented and highly sought-after dancer at Larry Flint's Hustlers Club. In an effort to assist Mr. Gallo's desire to become a model, plaintiff agreed to what she believed to be a legitimate employment with Mr. Defendant Combs and BB Entertainment at his white parties in the Hamptons, New York, and Miami, Florida, from 2004 to 2009. Plaintiff did not agree to a lifetime of aftermath of being used as a sexual pawn for the pleasure and financial benefit of others. Factual allegations. The plaintiff's employment at Defendant Combs' Labor Day White Party, as agreed to between Mr. Gallo and Defendant Thomas and Defendant Combs, SJC and BBE. Plaintiff began her employment at the ultra-exclusive, lavish Labor Day parties thrown by Defendant Combs at BBE, called the White Party, and Mr. Gallo began his employment as Sean John model. Plaintiff's first employment at the White Party was summer 2004. Plaintiff believed this to be a legitimate employment opportunity. Plaintiff was picked up by Defendant Thomas in a car driven by one of Defendant Doe's, owned either by Defendant Combs, BBE, SJC, CGE, or organizational Doe, and transported to Defendant Combs' estate in the Hamptons, New York, which served as a venue for Labor Day White Party. When plaintiff arrived at the Defendant Combs Hamptons estate with Defendant Thomas and other sex-trafficked individuals, Defendant Thomas brought them into the room where they changed into clothes provided for them. Plaintiff's outfit in the above picture was provided to her as a uniform, as she was led to believe she was in employment capacity. The plaintiff was required to wear the clothing provided as part of her employment. Plaintiff was also provided a separate room from the party, away from where the partygoers congregated, that was used by plaintiff and other employees as a break room to take respite during the party, as plaintiff was there in the employment capacity. Plaintiff was encouraged directly Defendant Thomas to provide lap dances and be sexually flirtatious with guests at the White Party. Plaintiff was also instructed to directed by Defendant Combs as to which guests plaintiff should focus attention and interaction with to ensure his guests were having a great time. Plaintiff was strictly instructed by Defendant Combs and Thomas on which bottles of alcohol and champagne female employees were allowed exclusively drink from, and also required plaintiff to take narcotics offered by the White Party guest. Despite being forced to drink copious amounts of alcohol and consume illicit narcotics, the encounters plaintiff was forced to endure were so excruciating that plaintiff remembers them as they still haunt her to this day. Plaintiff was forced to consume liquor and illicit narcotics as part of her employment at the white parties. Upon information and belief, defendant Combs laced the liquor with ecstasy, which is why plaintiff was provided strict rules on which bottles to consume. Plaintiff performed to the expectations of Combs, was personally thanked for her obedience to defendant Combs, and was subsequently invited for future employment at the white parties. The plaintiff was paid in cash at the end of the night, typically between 4 and 6 a.m. Once the party had concluded, plaintiff was paid by defendant Thomas, who was given the money from defendant Combs. So Thomas was paid. She was like the bottom bitch, wasn't she? And she was paying the girls for on his behalf. Yeah, as a separate organisation. It's totally legitimate, but it's not very moralistic to have all these little side companies. It's not. The first white party in 2004 had no sinister intent or requirements for physical sexual contact and seemed to be legitimate employment opportunity. So when the plaintiff was offered employment in the preceding years of the Labour Day White Party, she accepted the employment opportunity. Plaintiff was employed as entertainment at subsequent white parties in the Hamptons, New York. Plaintiff was always transported to the Hamptons by way of car service provided by either defendant Combs, BBE, SGC, CGE, or organisational does, with a driver who was also an employee of either defendant Combs, BBE, SGC, CGE, or organisational does. And to be quite honest, you don't know if these women are victims or not. The women he got to pay the girls, but they're not being named anyway till they realise they are. And with defendant Thomas also being present as a liaison and coordinator between employees and defendant Combs. Plaintiff would use numbers provided to contact either or both defendant Combs and Thomas to arrange transportation to the white parties. This included using the telephone text messaging service to confirm dates, times, location and pickup. Defendant Thomas then arrived at the location provided by the plaintiff at the agreed date and time in a chauffeur-driven vehicle provided, or under the control of defendant Combs, which would include defendant Thomas, a member of defendant Combs' security team, and other employees who were hired as entertainment for the party. Plaintiff was always provided wardrobe by defendant Thomas and Combs, and also was provided a break room while attending the white parties. Defendant Thomas and Combs groomed plaintiff into sex trafficking overtime. Around the third white party, defendants Thomas and Combs demanded plaintiffs begin engaging in vaginal sexual intercourse with guests, as they had learned about her past in the adult entertainment, and used it forcefully to coerce plaintiff into sexual work for the benefit of defendant Thomas and Combs and their beneficiaries. During this white party, plaintiff was provided a black dress to wear by defendant Thomas and Combs, when previously plaintiff was provided white clothing, like the other guests and the theme of the party. Upon information and belief, plaintiff believed she was required to wear the black dress to the white party to denote her capacity there as an employee, but more sinisterly as a trafficked sex worker. So when you see them in black dresses at the parties, that's what they're doing. One beneficiary of defendant Jacob, who plaintiff was demanded by defendant Combs to engage in sexual intercourse during a white party. Plaintiff fearing not only her safety, but her and her then boyfriend's job security did as instructed and went with defendant Jacob, where she engaged in forced sexual intercourse with defendant Jacob at the behest of defendant Combs. Plaintiff knew refusing defendant Combs' demands was not an option, and to do so would be her and Mr. Gallows' detriment. Plaintiff was coerced by defendant Combs into consuming copious amounts of allegedly laced liquor, alcohol, prior to being coerced and forced into having intercourse with defendant Jacob. Plaintiff as pictured with defendant Jacob after the assault, as plaintiff was still in her role of employment at the White Party. Plaintiff received an additional $1,000 in cash on top of what she had received as payment at prior to White parties from defendant Thomas at the end of the night. At the end of the night, defendant Combs personally congratulated plaintiff for following his directives with defendant Jacobs for a job well done. Disgusting, isn't it, really? He's got no respect for women at all. I don't understand how Cassie was with him. I really don't get it. But, I don't know. I can't say, can I? Can't speak for her. But, I don't know. I find him disgusting. At the end of the night, Thomas and Jacob solicit and ingest narcotics and engage in illicit sex acts. Plaintiff was also employed at the White parties that commenced as defendant Combs' Miami Star residence. At a Star Island residence. During these White Party employments, plaintiff's travel was arranged by defendant Thomas. Upon arrival at Fort Lauderdale Airport, a car service owned and operated by either defendant Combs or by organizational does would retrieve plaintiff defendant Thomas and other individuals from the airport and transport them to defendant Combs' residence on Star Island. Defendant Thomas was to defendant Combs as Ghislaine Maxwell was to Jeffrey Epstein. Without defendant Thomas, a woman using her inherent goodwill as a woman to gain the trust of another woman, coordinating and acting as an avatar for defendant Combs. Defendant Combs would be unable to execute his corrupt sex trafficking organization. Hope she's arrested too. Plaintiff is unable to record details from the Miami parties due to the increased demand that the plaintiff engaged in illicit narcotics and alcohol while employed for defendant Combs. Defendant Thomas and Combs passed off plaintiff to other defendants outside of defendant Jacob, named as defendant Does, to be sexually assaulted as part of their ongoing corrupt sex trafficking organization. Upon information and belief, plaintiff believes defendant Combs had hidden cameras in every room of his home in the Hamptons, New York, and Star Island and Miami. Upon information and belief, defendant Does, who were individuals defendants Thomas and Combs passed off plaintiff to be sexually assaulted, were filmed by defendant Combs' security cameras, sexually assaulting plaintiff while plaintiff is unconscious during the White parties in both New York and Florida. Upon information and belief, these individuals and plaintiff were recorded without their knowledge and consent. Upon information and belief, these treasure trove of evidence in defendant Combs' possession may either still be in defendant's possession or in the possession of the FBI, as the FBI executes the warrant and raid on defendant Combs' residence in 2024. So the FBI have all the information, not the Federal Bureau, not the RICO people who are filing this. So they don't know exactly what's on the tapes, just as at this point when they're taking this interview. Defendant Combs makes promises of career advancements by way of music artists to the plaintiff. Defendant Combs is very forceful, demanding and does not take no for an answer, and would often threaten to inflict bodily harm and or terminate plaintiff or her then boyfriend Mr. Gallow's employment and blackball them from the industry if plaintiff did not comply with his demands. As defendant Combs acted and was viewed in such a way to where Mr. Gallo and the plaintiff believed he had power, their defendant Combs threatened were credible. Defendant Combs used his power and influence to threaten and intimidate the plaintiff to continue participating in defendant Combs' corrupt sex and drug trafficking operation. Defendant Combs, in an effort to continue to silence plaintiff and keep her in his sex trafficking organisation, offered to help the plaintiff enter into the music industry business as a part of an all-female music group. Plaintiff knew of the defendant Combs' prowess in the music industry and knew he had the power to help her advance her music career. Plaintiff believed defendant Combs would fulfill his promises to help her career, just as he helped plaintiff then boyfriend's modelling career. Plaintiff, having been professionally exposed to the music industry side of defendant Combs' empire, grew more aware of the true nature of her employment at the white parties was grotesque, inexcusable, exploitative, and criminal. Plaintiff's only way to escape defendant Combs was to return to California, which the plaintiff did in 2009. Upon information and belief in retaliation of plaintiff's escape, defendant Combs had the plaintiff's then boyfriend Gallo blackballed from the modelling industry and had all of Mr. Gallo's campaigns with Sean John removed. Upon information and belief in retaliation for plaintiff's escape, defendant Combs had plaintiff blackballed from the entertainment industry. Defendant Combs' corrupt sex and drug trafficking organisation has caused plaintiffs lifelong harm. See, people don't realise people do things and then move on. You can't use that as damage to make a person do certain acts that they don't want to do. She didn't want to be there, and in my eyes it's forced. Plaintiff became severely depressed and began to blame herself for being trafficked and for sabotaging her own career. Being sex trafficked and abused had led plaintiff into a tailspin of anxiety and depression. In or about 2010, defendant was hospitalised for mental illness as a direct cause of her being trafficked by defendants. Somewhere plaintiff looked, she was reminded of being trafficked by defendant Combs, as he is an inescapable presence in the music, television and film. In the ensuing years, plaintiff has also experienced alcohol and drug addiction, as she attempted to cope with the emotional trauma of being assaulted and trafficked. Plaintiff also experienced intimacy issues, as she struggles to maintain emotional and sexual relationships with men. Plaintiff was recently married, however fears her marriage may fall apart due to her mental breakdowns precipitated by memories of assault and trafficking. Defendant Combs has altered the trajectory of the plaintiff's career, denying her a successful, lucrative career in the music industry. Excuse me. To this day, plaintiff experiences bouts of depression, anxiety and body image issues, feeling worthlessness and intimacy issues because of being trafficked by defendant Gomes. Plaintiff is a woman of faith, and when she saw the news coverage of the countless lawsuits initiated by brave other individuals against Gomes, she knew she had a moral obligation to speak up. Plaintiff feared further violence and retaliation from defendant Gomes in filing this lawsuit, but ultimately decided that it was imperative she spoke her truth with the hopes that no other individual would have endured the egregious and heinous treatment she has. Defendant seeks justice for herself and for any other Combs victims. Trafficking and Victims Protection Act. According to the plaintiff, she was transported from New York to Florida throughout by Combs for the purpose of engaging in activities. Plaintiff asserts during this time, plaintiff was forced to engage in work and perform acts to pleasure of and behest of Combs. Between 2006 and 2009, defendant Combs forced plaintiff to engage in prostitution and sex work at his homes in the Hamptons, in New York and Miami and Florida. Plaintiff asserts that defendant Vibes and PMC were involved in defendant Combs' organised sex trafficking enterprise. Plaintiff asserts that defendant Vibes and PMC involvement in the enterprise included in providing defendant Combs resources like internationally and falsely marketing and promoting defendant Combs' white parties in its publication as a high-profile networking and social event in an effort to disguise and deceive the real intent of the event, which was to further defendant Combs and his various businesses, including BBE, SGC, CGE, and Vibes and PMC profits. In further enhance of defendants' illegal enterprise, defendants Vibes and PMC ensured defendant Combs and his businesses, BBE, SGC, and CGE, appeared overwhelmed in its magazine to be on its covers or pages inside defendant's magazine, featuring pages of dedicated to defendant Combs personally for his businesses. Defendant believes defendant Vibes and PMC engaged in defendant Combs' illegal enterprise to increase the visibility and profitability of its publication, Vibes magazine, through the magazine's content, constant affiliation and relationship with Combs. Plaintiff seeks justice against all defendants for the trafficking. Claims related to plaintiff's picture and likeness. On or around Labour Day in 2004, plaintiff's picture was taken while in her employment capacity at defendant Combs' White Party in Hamptons. Plaintiff did not know what her picture was being taken for or would be used for, nor was plaintiff's consent sought given. Plaintiff has never entered into any agreement with any defendant to license her likeness, nor was it a term for employment at the White Party. Defendant Vibe and PMC intentionally mislabeled plaintiff as a guest at the party in its magazine to further conceal the true intentions of the event and the plaintiff's employment role at the event in an effort to further the goals of defendant's illegal criminal enterprise. Defendant Vibe and PMC exploited plaintiff's likeness in their November 2006 magazine, where defendant Combs was the cover and the story was about defendant's white parties, which by this point was a cultural phenomenon. Plaintiff's unauthorized, unconsensual, and infringement use of her picture and likeness appears on 184. There she is. Plaintiff did not discover the infringing use until approximately April 2024. This infringing use and promoted without a limitation product synopsis with defendant counts, including the White Party and defendants BBE, SGC and CGE. Thanks for staying with me if you're still with me. It's a lot to read through. Plaintiff is readily and easily identifiable in the infringing use, and their picture likeness is prominently displayed in defendant Vibes and PMC publication. Aforementioned act violates plaintiff's right to privacy via misappropriation. Plaintiff has never given any defendant a release to use her likeness in any publication or platform, media or format, digital, physical or otherwise. In the November 2006 issue of Defendant Vibe and PMC is still readily available for sale and viewable online. At all relevant times, plaintiff had the sole and exclusive right of the publicity with regard to the use of her picture, portrait and likeness under the New York state law and common law right to publicity. Defendants have, and without plaintiff's authorization or consent, since used plaintiff's likeness for advertising and other trade purposes without consent and without a license to promote defendant Combs, BBE, SGA and all that business products for commercial gain. Plaintiff is further informed and believed thereon alleges that defendant Vibes and PMC used plaintiff's likeness in its magazine nationwide, including this district. None of the defendants at any point has license for the use of plaintiff's picture and likeness to promote the White Parties. At no point did the plaintiff authorize, consent to, or otherwise seek to allow defendants or any of them to exploit a picture, image, or likeness as seen in the infringing use in any manner. Plaintiff is informed and believes thereon alleges that defendants and each of them engage in unauthorized exploitation and misappropriation of plaintiff's photograph, image, picture, and likeness by prominently featuring plaintiff in an advertisement and marketing material for defendant Combs on various online platforms and physical materials, including but not limited to the infringing use. Plaintiff is informed and believes thereon alleges that defendants and each of them engaged in the unauthorized exploitation and misappropriation of plaintiff's photograph, image and picture and likeness is in an effort to further and continue their corrupt sex and drug trafficking organization. Though their general business partnership and financial support of defendant Combs, defendant Vibe and PMC aided and abetted defendant Combs' actions herein. Defendants' publications and distribution of the infringing use has resulted in substantial injury to the plaintiff. First course of action. Conduct and participate in the RICO enterprise through a pattern of racketeering, actively a violation of racketeer, influenced and corruption, Organisation Act, codified at against all defendants. Plaintiff incorporates by reference all preceding paragraphs and re-alleges them as if set forth fully herein. Defendant Vibes and PMC are 100% liable for the actions of defendant Combs, and by extension BBE, SGC and CGE and Thomas RICO orchestrators. Wow, okay, they're the racketeering orchestrators. Defendants Vibes and PMC financially benefited from defendant Combs. Oh, I see. So it's another company also benefiting from this racketeering, and the sex trafficking. Yeah. Okay. Defendants Vibes and PMC financially benefited from defendant Combs, BBE, SGC and CGE through their partnership with Defendant Combs and the brands he owned, listed as defendants above. The collective provided the RICO orchestrators with unfettered access to resource and failed to adequately investigate, supervise and or monitor how those resources were being used, who was using those resources, and the purpose of the use of those resources. So they haven't got to the bones of it yet, and they haven't looked into the collective, the amount of people involved, and they failed on that score the same, the FBI, so that's where this is what this attorney's saying. The support provided by defendants Thomas Jacobson's BBE, SGC and CGE, Vibe and PMC was a lifeline that spearheaded and maintained the RICO orchestrators' deprived actions. Upon information and belief, the establishment of the business relationship with a prominent publication by PMC and Combs allowed for distribution platform for all Defendant Combs' business endeavours to disguise his true intentions with overly broad and vague in nature description of activities. Defendants Vibe and PMC knew or should have known that Defendant Combs, BBE, SGC and CGE had no intention to utilise the resources he received for business-related purposes, and they did not put any mechanism in place to ensure that their resources, specifically their publication, were not being used for any illegal activity. Defendants' Vibes and PMC willful blindness resulted in plaintiff suffering the harm of detailed herein. Defendants are individuals and entities within the meaning of person, as defined, because each of the capable holding and does hold a legal or beneficial interest in property. The association is composed of Defendant Combs, BBE, SGC, CGE, and Vibe PC, and Thomas, Jacob, John, and Jane Doe 1 to 10, and organisational Does 1 to 10. That's a lot of people involved in this. In the relevant part, defines a racketeering activity as any act of threat involving murder, kidnapping, gambling, arson and robbery, bribery, extortion, dealing in obscene matter, or dealing in a controlled substance or illicit chemical, as defined by the Controlled Substance Act, which is chargeable under the state law and punishable by imprisonment of more than 1 year. B. Any act which is indictable under any of the following provisions of Title 18 of United States Code, relating to trafficking in firearms, relating to mail fraud, relating to wire fraud, relating to racketeering, relating to laundering and monetary instruments. Any offence involving fraud connected with the case under Title 11, a felonious manufacture, importation, receiving, concealment, buying, selling, or otherwise dealing in a controlled substance or listed chemical. That counts as racketeering.